up for our next question and answer period. Because we are recording this, I'll be walking around with a microphone for the next round of questions and answers, just so we're all aware. So bear with me with technology. Thank you everyone for coming back. We'd like to once again thank our sponsors, Deep Root and Al Key and Inova for their support today of this event. Our next speaker is Marnie Marjarell of Alive Structures. Marnie and Alive Structures is a design build firm. It's a certified women-owned business based in Brooklyn, New York, founded in 2007. Alive Structures has many years of professional experience with a wide range of landscaping projects. The company is committed to improving the environment of New York City and specializes in ecological green roofs and gardens, improving the city's air and water quality, reducing energy consumption, creating natural habitats, and making the city more resilient and healthy. Alive Structures has been featured in the New York Times, Martha Stewart in Habitat, Bloomberg News, and many other publications. Its clients have ranged from residential homeowners to large corporations, industrial property owners, and public housing. Marnie and Alive Structures have received grants from the Department of Environmental Conservation, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Greenpoint Community Environmental Fund. As a native New Yorker, Marnie is passionate about her city and strives to make it a more sustainable, natural, and beautiful place to live. She is often collaborating with environmental organizations, artists, and other businesses and city agencies in order to reach these ambitious goals. Please join me in welcoming Marnie. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. So I started Alive Structures in 2007. We're about the same age, our businesses, and it's given us a lot of opportunity to do a diverse range of projects using many different systems and working in many different environments in New York City. So we've worked on some public projects, working with hospitals, low-income housing, but mostly a lot of residential projects, lots of small-scale residential projects on gut renovations. But today I'm going to talk about our industrial-sized projects because I think they're of greatest interest. And it's also what I'm most interested in is, of course, bringing these green roofs to scale. Creating larger green roofs is really an effective way of creating some natural habitat in New York City, creating corridors for biodiversity, and it's also just really exciting to do big projects. So I'll be focusing on two projects on Kingsland Avenue in Greenpoint, Brooklyn. They are on top of Broadway Stage's owned building, which are movie studios, installed in 2016 and 2019. And I'm going to talk about the plant choices made there, the techniques used, the biodiversity that these groups have created, and also the community that have surrounded these roofs over the last few years. So you can see on the upper part of the slide that is 520 Kingsland, which we installed in 2016. And that is about 25,000 square feet over several different roofs. Further down, also highlighted on Kingsland Avenue, is another 30,000 square feet over 3 different roofs, and when we installed those in 2019. So yeah, as I said, these are movie studios. Broadway Stages is also very committed to solar, as you can see, and we're trying our best to combine that, although they're not exactly right next to each other. So these are some overviews of the green roofs installed in 2019. That's 520 Kingsland. I'm sorry, it's a low-res image. You can see there's 5 different green roofs here. 2 are extensive, planted with sedum, and 3 are intensive, planted primarily with native plants. And 3 of them are open to the public and accessible. That's a view of the 5th floor at 520 Kingsland, which is the most heavily accessed and is designed to accommodate festivals, tours, workshops, and classes that take place there almost every week during the warm season. These are also some different perspectives, a bit distorted. And we have a water feature, which we call the orb. It's got circulating water, and it looks sort of like a crystal, and a child has put their hand on it and made a wish, and adults too. So I think that's an added little piece of magic to the project, which was really nice. And you can look at the sewage treatment plant through the orb, and it's upside down, which is just that in itself is. So you'll notice the sewage treatment plant, of course, in the background, which is great. We told them we wanted it put there after we installed the green roof. But I think it's the largest sewage treatment plant in New York City, and it's a great opportunity, educationally speaking, to bring people up on the roof and talk about stormwater issues, combined sewage overflow, and really, really physically show what the water issues are in New York City, especially to students. This is the green roof installed in 2019, further down on Kingsland Avenue. So you can see the roofs from each other. When you're standing on one, you can see the other, which is cool. This is one of the green roofs that we installed in 2019, and this is in 2021. And I'm going to talk about the plants used and the strategy we used. And I'm going to contradict Artie, which I'm really sorry to do, because we planted a lot of annuals on these roofs. So I just want to put that out there as an option if it makes sense. So every project is different. This is the installation in 2016 of 520 Kingsland. The green roof layers here consist of a root barrier, a retention mat, some drainage channels, 2 inches of drainage medium, then a separation fabric, drip line irrigation, and another 6 inches of soil medium. And then we put in pathways and planted it. This is an addition, this building, and the owner, I don't know if it's true or not, he said like he kind of built the building so I could put a green roof on it. I don't know if that's true, but it's really strong, so we could really put anything on it, which was great. This is the largest green roof on that project. It's about 12,000 square feet, or on that building, and we just used drainage boards there and 3 inches of soil medium and used sedum mats. And it's not accessible, but everyone can really see it quite well from the other roofs. This is in 2019. Those are the other roofs on Kingsland. It's basically the same system, except for we took out 1 inch of the growing medium and put in 1 inch of needled mineral wool to increase the stormwater retention. But we do have irrigation systems on all of these roofs. We try not to use it that much, and that's of benefit to the plants as well, because the more you water these roofs, the more weeds you tend to get, because the plants that we actually desire don't want to be so heavily watered, at least some of them. So I'm going to talk about, the use of annuals, seeding the roof, and our overall, outlook on these projects. I really wanted to create a natural meadow using native plants. I have a background in biology conservation. I'm not a biologist though, just studied it and very interested. So I had studied a lot of Larry Wiener's work, who maybe all of you know. who is a real expert in wildflower meadows, and he consulted on the 520 Kingsland project. That's my one worker during COVID who was not, who just happens to be one of my best friends. And that is me seeding the roof just in early April 2020. And I just want to talk a little bit about the use of seeds and also annuals. So we installed the green roof layers and the soil medium over the Christmas break in 2019 because that's when the movie studios were closed. And then we thought, you know, as soon as spring comes, we'll install all these plant plugs that we've ordered. Because of COVID, things got really complicated, and I won't get into all the details, but I was not able to plant all of those hundreds of trays of plugs. And I did have 30,000 square feet of soil. So I needed to cover it with vegetation, or else weeds were going to migrate and take over. So you might think I was really panicked, but no. I'm having a great time, actually, totally honestly. I know this was a horrible time for most of you, and I'm sorry, but me and my friend had an awesome time seeding these roofs. I don't know why I'm wearing a mask when I'm with one other person on 16,000 square feet outdoors, but those were the days, right? And I decided that the bucket was actually better to go with. Annuals. Okay, so that's 2 months later. Yeah. Okay, they're not native, so just to put that, get that out there. Right. These are a mixture of plants from Europe and China and California and all sorts of things. And as you can see, we have a really dense coverage. These are very quick to establish. They're blooming right away. They're creating pollinator habitat, and they're all going to die at the end of the season. And I needed them desperately. So a lot of the time you find these seeds in like your standard wildflower mix, which a lot of the time has no native plants in it. So wildflowers is a really tricky word. As you can see, this is coverage. I mean, of course, I really heavily seeded it, so it's not like it's just the plants, you know, it was being neurotic. And but we also seeded the pathways using a grass blend from wildflower farms in Canada, which was you know, an economic decision for the pathways, with some mixed results. And it also really impressed the owner of the building, who's always like, hey, I thought you were gonna have more flowers up here. Where are all the flowers? Because so many of my you know, plant mixes have a lot of grasses in it. And he's like, yeah, but what about all the bees and the birds that are supposed to come? Like, where are they? You know, I want some blooms. So I was thinking of that when I put this, because I want to keep him happy. So here are some of the seeds, the annual seeds that I used. Some of them emerge more quickly than others. The annual tick seed, annual bee balm, black-eyed Susans, blanket flower, phlox, those are all natives. Then the other ones, cosmos and California poppy, dwarf delphiniums, no, snapdragons, yeah, and calendula, zinnias, candy tufts. I mean, I don't even know the names of these plants because I never use them. Wild red poppy, cornflower. So this was, you know, like using all these flowers that I always felt like, that's stupid. I'm not going to use those annuals. Like, I'm going to use these other, anyways, now I love them. Here's wild red poppy. So most of those annuals died down, and we removed just the strawy dead material at the end of the season and made space for the plugs that we finally got. Okay, this is going back in time a little bit. In 2016 at 520 Kingsland, here we put the plugs in first, which is my preferred order, if I can choose. And we also used seeds in that installation, only using the native plants seeds. So here are some of the perennial choices that we made on those roofs, annuals aside. This is the orange milkweed. That's an annual, the blanket flower. In the background, you see Chamacrista fasciculata, the partridge pea, and we seeded that and came to regret it. So if anyone's familiar with that plant, it's great for biodiversity. Pollinators love it. It could be the right plant in a certain circumstance, but here it just really took over and we had to take out a lot of it. Oh, this is a great study. It happened to come out in 2015 when I was designing the 520 Kingsland roof, and I feel like we don't need to reinvent the wheel constantly. So this gave a very thorough evaluation of, I think, over 70 different plant species in a variety of soil depths, sun exposure, different levels of irrigation, and it was very detailed. Here's some of the lists that they came up with. So it was really helpful the way they ranked all of these species. I'm not going to show you every page from A to Z, but I'll show you some of the other plants that we planted up there, the ones that we ultimately chose. Okay, so this is not one of the highly ranked plants from that study, but it looks so cool. And it's the Monarda punctata, sorry. It's kind of like a biennial, and we seeded it in. I mean, seeds are relatively inexpensive, so I've tried a lot of different things, and I do like experimenting with different plants. And I'm not using 100% all natives. I mean, this is native, but, and also native is really like a weird word because some of these are native to California. Some of them are native to, I don't know, Wisconsin. So they're US native. Those are the seed heads of Asclepias tuberosa, Campanula, that's our native bluebell, which is a really nice low-growing plant that I've used a lot on the side of the paths. This is the green roof that we installed in 2019, and it is heavily planted with little blue stem, which has done very, very well, too well, and I've been trying to thin it out and put in more flowering perennials. But, I mean, one of the lowest maintenance roofs, in my experience, have been roofs dominated by grasses. They just, they're very simple, they look very elegant. You don't have to over-fertilize or water them, and if you have the right conditions, you really don't have to do much. This is this is in 2017 or something. So some of the original plants we put in have died out since then. It's been a really great learning experience because I am constantly on these roofs since the day they've been installed, and I've really learned a lot about the different plants in these circumstances. And it's not all green roofs, this is these green roofs. So it's just my experience. There's the Echinacea tennesseensis, which has got a really beautiful, unique petal structure. And the purple prairie clover, which has done very well. That is the penstemon hirsutus, the small penstemon, hairy penstemon, and a lot of wild columbine. Asters have, of course, done very well. Swamp milkweed and, let's see, all the others. You know, I mean, I just really mess around with a lot of plants. Like, I can't say Silene virginica does great on green roofs, but I still wanted to try. And it's still there. I haven't, like, covered the roof with it, but it's wonderful if you can go back to your projects over the years and just see, you know, oh, there's my little Silene still there. It's still alive. So excited. Everyone said it was going to die. We have a lot of wild strawberry and the native prickly pear, which surprises a lot of people when they come up to the roof because they're like, this is not native. I'm like, yeah. We have our own native prickly pear. These are not native, obviously, but yeah. And it's great because on the roof you can plant bulbs and the squirrels aren't coming and digging them out, So why do we care that much about native plants? And just to clarify, I do also think sedum is great. And there's tons of biodiversity with sedum, especially moths, which sometimes sedums bloom at night, so they're coming at night, and then you have the bat population. And I think sedum is wonderful. I just happen to be really drawn to these wildflowers, and it just became kind of my thing. I like them. And that is the annual tick seed, and you can see it's really densely covering the roof, and that's, I think, the second year. We were lucky to work with New York City Audubon, and I know that, Chris, you've worked with them as well over at Javits Center, and they've done really incredible research on green roofs and the biodiversity that they can create. I worked with Dustin Partridge. He also started the Green Roofers Research Alliance, which is a great resource for all sorts of research that you guys can check out online. These are some of his methodologies that he used to study biodiversity on green roofs. He did paired roofs, so a vegetated roof versus a non-vegetated roof, different traps, bat sonars. So arthropods, he's found lots of them on the roofs, and they're incredibly important, even in the urban environment. They include insects, spiders, crustaceans. We don't have any crustaceans on the roof. And as you can see, there's a lot more of them on a green roof than on a non-vegetated roof. And if you ever go on iNaturalist, there's hundreds of photos there of different insects documented on the Kingsland Wildflowers roof, which is really fun because there's some rare wild bees and stuff. He produced a lot of great information, which was really helpful and wonderful to have. The Kingsland Wildflowers roof was a unique roof in terms of how quickly native pollinators came there and how diverse the population of insects were. So, I mean, I think a lot of you understand the concept of biodiversity in general, but it's important just to remember, like, every day when you're just surrounded by pigeons, you're just like, why? Why are there so many pigeons, you know? And it kind of, there's a reason, you know, we just don't have the number and diversity of birds and bats and arthropods. Bats, we have them in New York City. So we recorded, or New York City Audubon recorded 7 different bat species that came to the roof, which I found particularly exciting. I feared that the acoustic part of this would not work. I anticipated that this was going to be an issue. So just bear with me for 1 second, because it's worth it. I hope you guys can hear us. Okay, the next one's really good. And then I'll stop, I promise. That first part was really cool, like that. I didn't know what bats sounded like. So that's in the middle of Greenpoint, Brooklyn, next to the largest sewage treatment plant, next to Newtown Creek, which is a Superfund site, a very heavily industrial and polluted area, and we have many different bats coming there. So this is the power of green roofs. Birds, New York City Audubon focuses on birds, so they did a lot of data collecting on that. New York City is incredibly important for migratory birds because of the Atlantic Flyway, which we're dead in the middle of. They really need that stopover habitat. Community and having experiences with nature. Nature defined as a green roof in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, I mean, you know, I don't know what's nature anymore, really. You know, nature is so affected by humans everywhere on the planet. But this feels like nature, at least for a little while, getting access to this naturalistic space with all these wildflowers, and it's not very heavily designed or curated. It's really just designed just to feel natural. You know, it's not Pete Rudolph. But you know, I remember at one time at the High Line, there's blocks and blocks of Pete Rudolph's amazing work, and then towards the end is just what the vegetation was there originally on the High Line. And I felt this immense relief from the human touch and the art that his work is. Incredibly beautiful and thoughtful designs. Just to be like, yeah, I love this rubbly, crappy looking vegetation. It's just here on its own, and I'm just experiencing it, and I liked it. 520 Kingsland was my idea, so it's really kind of like my baby. It's not a typical project that I bid on. Working with the property owner and working with community groups like Newtown Creek Alliance, we created this project together. And NCA has done an amazing job programming the space. So it is an outdoor classroom. They bring students there from all over New York City every week. We also have a Wildflower Festival, which I encourage all of you to come to, 6 years in a row now. It's really fun. We have beer, we have performances, we have lots of green roof tours, we have lots of different people set up selling food and giving information away about plants, green roofs, solar power in the parking lot, and we have some great musicians. It's a lot of fun. And we also have an artist who's been programming a lot of performances on the roof, working with different musicians and artists. We have exhibits on the roof, sculptures on the roof. It has gone beyond what I could have ever conceived of, and I didn't conceive of all of this stuff. So it's really just like the biodiversity and the insects that have come, people have too, and it's become an ecosystem in itself that I no longer touch. You know, doing its own thing. We participate in Open House New York, Wildflower Week, if it still exists. And we have open Fridays, every single Friday during July, June and July, from 5 to 8 p.m., the green roofs are opened. You can bring, a bottle of wine there, or you can impress your date. Like, I know this really cool place that no one else knows about. And just integrating simple pathways throughout the roofs was very important to bring people through them. Another winter picture. Oh, this is a video. It's not of me, it just starts out of me. But how do I play it? Oh, it's not gonna work? Okay, I'm gonna take my phone out. No, I'm just kidding. All right, forget that. All right, here, let's put it on a nice picture of the green roof. Sure.
Okay, I think we're good. Questions?
Do you know the dates for this year's Wildflower Festival yet?
I love that question. I am not sure. I think it's going to be July 27th, but we have a website called Kingsland Wildflowers. I think it's .com. It should be .org, but whatever. And you can find out tons of information there about the open hours and all the events that Newtown Creek Alliance plans, and also the artists that we work with.
Is that related to that? Is it, so it's publicly accessible? Like
Yeah.
you could just walk in there?
No, not
Okay.
anytime. That's
Okay.
why you should look at the website, because
Okay.
there are specific times that you can come. And, all these workshops and things, a lot of them are for invited, classes and specific people. So it's better not just to wander up there. You'll be really confused. There'll be a lot of, set design people, and it's a very active movie studio. And I could list a long name of shows that you probably know that are shot there, but I've never seen any celebrities, so it's been pointless to be excited about it.
Have you ever used any sort of fertilizer to help the plants grow, or has it just been like it all grows on its own?
We were just talking about that. That's great. Yeah, I try not to fertilize the roofs at all. I want the opposite conditions that, say, like a farmer wants. I want it to be more acidic. I want it to be less fertile, because the plants that I'm choosing don't want that, right? So I want to create the conditions that they want. And once I fertilize it and water it really heavily, I'm getting a lot of weeds. And it's making a lot of work for me. So I don't fertilize it. I don't fertilize them at all. I'm not in charge of choosing you guys, which I like.
I can just shout.
Okay.
What kind of really nerdy question? What kind of irrigation are you using on
What kind of
this?
irrigation?
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Different irrigation systems. At 520 Kingsland, we put the drip line irrigation 6 inches under the soil to create very resilient plants that they had to struggle to get down there. It means that they're very strong plants right now, 6 years after that. Sometimes they don't look great during a drought, but they're not dead. So that was one example. And then at the Kingsland green roofs that are further down that we installed more recently, we actually have a sprinkler system, and we wanted to be able to control what got irrigated and what didn't better. So we don't want the paths to be irrigated, so we really designed the irrigation system to just kind of do more what we wanted, and that's why we went with the sprinkler system there.
Time for one more question?
This particular project or another, do you ever just mound up the soil and get some shrubs on it? Any reason why not? Especially because you mentioned that the building was built for good weight.
We have some shrubs growing in a couple of planters at 520 Kingsland. We have some beach plums growing there, but in general, we're not growing shrubs. We do have some volunteer trees that have come up, but it's not our intention. But we have filled the parking lot up with all the semi-dead shrubs from my other projects. So it's kind of like a hospital / morgue for all my other work, which the owners tolerate.
Thank you again. Thank you, Moni.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michelle Cashin, Director of Design Build for Brooklyn Grange. Brooklyn Grange is the leading rooftop farming and intensive green roof business in the U.S. They operate the world's largest rooftop soil farms located on 2 roofs in New York City and grow over 50,000 pounds of organically cultivated produce per year. As the Director of Grange's design build efforts, she takes on innovative soil and plant-based projects that contribute to the ecology of New York City, from green roofs and green walls to backyards and sidewalks, work with residential, commercial, industrial clients, and everyone in between. Please join me in welcoming Michelle and thank her for being here today.
Just press enter or next, right? Okay, cool. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Michelle Cash. I'm really excited to talk to you all about the intersection of urban agriculture and green roofs. Before I dive in, a little about me. I've been working at Brooklyn Grange for some time now, since 2014, and have spent about half that time farming our rooftops. I started off in our farm crew and moved on to farm manager, and then the other half working in design build, helping clients bring their desired green space to fruition. I'm from New York, from Queens, and I wanted to get into this work to contribute to making New York City a greener, more sustainable city. So I just want to also say thank you to all of you who contribute to that work as well. Okay, so these are the contents of this presentation. I'll do a quick overview of Brooklyn Grange. We kind of covered all of the basics of green roof design, but I'll talk a little bit more about how we adapted it to farming. Our soil evolution, we'll talk about layout and infrastructure specifically on urban farms, urban rooftop farms. Talk about accessibility, amenity spaces. We'll talk a little bit about drainage and metro polder or WAVN, as Chris had mentioned earlier. And then as well as right farm, right place. You can't put a farm anywhere. It's really important that it's in the right conditions for success. And then right farm, right client, which is maybe the most important part of all of this. Okay, so Brooklyn Grange, we are a pretty unique business in that we're basically three companies rolled up into one. We are a rooftop farming company. We have programming and events, and we have the design build maintenance team. The farming department is really what most folks know us for. We grow, updated figure here, of over 100,000 pounds of vegetables on our rooftops every year. We used to sell most of those vegetables to restaurants, but because of the pandemic, we had to change our business model to donate vegetables to mostly nonprofits and communities in need. And I put that in air quotes because that work is really grant funded through partnerships with businesses and organizations like NYU, as well as Blundstone, which is a really great boot company that I recommend. This is an image of our Brooklyn Navy Yard farm built in 2012. It's about 1.5 acres of space, rooftop growing space. Here are some crops of what we grow. We've got leeks, peppers, flowers, radishes, different herbs, leafy greens, tomatoes, and many more, and some amaranth in the top. We've been growing vegetables for over 10 years, and we've definitely honed our ability to grow on these rooftops, but we've also learned about where growing food is appropriate, the best setting for where that food is, and how to ensure that these projects have long-term success. We also have our programming and events department. Basically, this is the part of our business that is responsible for any type of guest engagement on the farms, whether that be weddings, corporate retreats, events, tours, workshops. They do yoga. We've had fashion shows up there. This is a picture probably from a wedding of people enjoying the sunflowers, which is definitely the #1 guest experience. The most popular experience on the farm is taking pictures with sunflowers. Here's an example of a farm at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Guests line up in between the vegetables, the pews, and this is where the ceremony takes place. And then the last department, which is what I lead, the design, build, maintain team. We do pretty much anything that a traditional landscaping company would do. We design, build, and maintain green spaces. I say green spaces because in addition to farms, we do green roofs, green walls, ground level, indoor, etc. So on the left is a picture of a ground level courtyard in Manhattan that we maintain. On the right is a rooftop in Long Island City that we built and designed. Here's some more of our projects. Green roofs, green walls, ground level, both extensive and intensive green roofs. And then we also have this carve out within maintenance called farm ops, which I'll talk a little bit about today because that has to do with urban agriculture. Essentially, farm ops clients are clients that have asked us to grow food for them beyond just like a small residential garden. So the Javits Center is an example of this. Some of these clients have also asked us to teach their staff or their clients of their business how to grow vegetables. So there could be this combined scope of both production and mentorship. And like I said, Javits is a good example of this. They expanded their green roof, or they expanded their entire footprint in 2019, 2020, and we helped design the rooftop farm that they built, and now we maintain it. We did not build it out, but we grow vegetables for their culinary team, for their catering. Okay, so everyone's very familiar with this by now. It was in other folks' slides. But as you know, with green roof design, the traditional continuous system, you'll have your waterproofing, and then basically your green roof system starts above the waterproofing. So we've got root barrier, protection mat, drainage layer, filter sheet, growing substrate or medium, and vegetation. Sometimes you'll see insulation between the root barrier and the protection mat. Oftentimes you'll also see a thicker capillary mat above the filter sheet or the drainage layer that helps absorb and retain water better than just a filter sheet. But to adapt this to farming, basically we just added more soil. There wasn't really anything that novel happening. From your traditional sedum green roof, which is really could be just 4 inches of soil, we added another 8 to 10 inches to have an average of 12 inches across all of the rooftop space for our farms. Yeah, I think that's it. Sorry. So yeah, with a little bit more soil, you're able to have a more diverse plant mix, and that's where we're able to grow things like vegetables on these roofs. And the green roof system has adapted itself really well for growing vegetables, other than, I would say, the media, and that's because any extensive or intensive media is not going to be the same as your ground level soil as it's designed, as it's supposed to be. Our first farm in Long Island City used traditional intensive media. That was the best thing that was available to the industry at the time. But over the course of 2 years, this was back in 2010, we realized that using this type of soil for vegetable production is not sustainable long term. Like I said, this makes sense. Engineered rooftop media is not designed to hold on to moisture. It's supposed to allow water to flow through it, which is really tough for vegetable production because, you know, water is the conveyor belt of nutrients. So with that, you're losing the ability to wick up nutrient uptake into the plants. Over the past 10 years, we've been working with soil manufacturers to improve the soil blends, because we of course have to use these soil blends because they're lightweight, to improve the soil blends over the years, basically emulating a well-drained sandy loam. Through this process, since 2010, we've increased nitrogen slightly, slightly lowered the pH in the soil blend. You want to have your pH to be just shy of neutral, so high 6s for vegetable production. We also worked with the soil manufacturers to substantially reduce particle size distribution, increase the ratio of fine sand and silt in the blends, and reduced coarse sand. All of this is to help reduce the drainage speed. And then last, reducing the organic composition as well. So I think it was mentioned earlier that 20% organic matter was in the growing medias that we use, but we've seen that organic content kind of degrades breaks down pretty quickly. So we've brought down that percentage of organic matter in the soil for vegetable production. And it's not just adapting the rooftop media, it's also changing the way that we farm. So over the years, we've gone from tilling the soil, which is on the left, to tarping the soil, which is on the right. And this is to help maintain the soil structure. When you till soil, you're breaking up the biological integrity in the top few inches. That's where a lot of the microbial life lives. So anytime you're churning it to replace crops or to plant successively, you're destroying that soil structure. So we don't use these machines as much anymore, especially the one on the top left. And we've switched instead to tarping. So you can see you put out these large plastic tarps, they smother the plants, block off their access to sunlight, and then when you pull them up a week or two later, the beds are pretty much ready to be planted. We might till a little bit to shape the beds at this point, but it's much more minimal to what it used to be. And also, anytime you till the soil, you're releasing carbon from the soil, from what's being stored there. So we want to reduce that as well. And this has helped with preserving the health and fertility of the soil over the years too. So in addition to adapting the medium, one other difference between an extensive green roof and our farms is the soil depth. So all 3 of our farms, like I said, were built with greater soil. They're on existing structures. None of these buildings were new construction. They were intentionally selected because there was no fortification needed for the roofs. And for our budgets for building out these green roofs, that was really important. Any retrofit to the roof deck would have been totally cost prohibitive. And you can see they all kind of look the same. They're pre-war industrial buildings, so they can all handle the weight of the soil, and they all have about 12 inches on average of soil depth. Here's the installation of Sunset Park. This is our 3rd farm. It was installed in 2018, soil being blown up to the roof. Okay. I'll go back one slide. So when we have farms on existing structures, there's still a limit. So like I said, these buildings allow for around 100 pounds per square foot, but ideally you would have even more soil than that. And new construction is where you can really see greater depth. If the farm is incorporated into the design and the budget in advance when the building is being developed, deeper soil is possible, and that's what we see at the Javits Center. So this is on the north side of the building. The extensive green roof that Chris's team installed is on the south side, and this is the farm, the vegetable side of the rooftop farm. So here we have 12 to 24 inches of soil, so it's a significant increase from our own roofs. On the other side of the building, where from the that was the east side of the building, this is the west side of the building, there's an orchard, and the soil here is around 3 feet deep, and so we were able to plant a food forest and orchard on this side. Soil depth is critical not just for plant health, but also for cultivation when it comes to farming. If you're able to have greater soil depth, it really broadens your cultivation techniques. For example, trellising becomes a lot easier. We rely on this TP system on the left for trellising crops like tomatoes and cucumbers and peas, and all of the bamboo stakes, which you can see here, kind of just lean into each other to stay upright, and they're in the soil probably about, you know, as far down as we can get them. We bang them down, but if you're only working with 12 inches, it's not going to be as fortified. And you can see on the right what happens when a really windy day comes through. It knocks them all over. But thankfully, this is a pretty dramatic example. This is rare. Maybe once a year, if that, they all are down like this. Most of the time, it might just be a couple of plants that have fallen over. But at Javits, where they have much deeper soil, they're able to trellis like you would at ground level. They have a single row. The metal stakes are pounded down into the soil 2 feet, so they're able to replicate what you see at ground level, which is much better. Greater soil depth also means even more crop diversity. So we can grow a lot of different things at our own farms, but at Javits, with more soil depth, you've got things like corn. I'm sure they could grow wheat if they wanted to. As I mentioned, there's an orchard. There's apples, pears, pawpaws, plums, gooseberries, blueberries, different fruit-bearing shrubs. And then also, we can grow root vegetables at our 3 farms, but at Javits, their root vegetables are always a lot bigger, as shown by this beet picture. Okay, so layout of the farms. This is a pretty critical conversation to be had early on in the design. So you can see this is our Navy Yard farm, and by layout, best shape of the farm, how the beds are situated, what kind of infrastructure as well is needed on the farm, where it's going to go, so that you're being as efficient and productive with your labor as possible. So for our farms, I mentioned they were all in existing buildings, which definitely influences the layout. You're limited by what's already on the roof, whether that's AC units, skylights, water towers, bulkheads, etc. So for the Navy Yard farm, we had to have the 6-foot egress path for FDNY around the edges of around the perimeter of the farm, and this is we keep the soil separate from the 6-foot egress path by retaining it with just a traditional aluminum edge. You'll see this. I'm sure you guys are very familiar, but you'll see this on a lot of green roof designs. And even for all of the structures, the aluminum edge is separating the soil from the bulkheads, the skylights, the water towers, etc. And then we have these pathways that traverse the farm and segment it out into the grid that you can kind of see here. These paths are critical for moving materials across the roof, whether it's wheelbarrows full of weeds, compost, trays of seedlings, vegetables that were harvested. For the sake of efficiency, we need these paths to expedite our movements rather than relying exclusively on the perimeter. They also help to create, like I said, a grid on the farm, breaking up the lengths of beds somewhat evenly. So you can see in the middle, all of these beds are relatively the same length, and then on the right and the left, these beds are also of very similar in length size. As opposed to our first farm in Queens, because of this kooky shape of the building, all of the beds are different lengths. This building is actually two buildings that were combined, or I guess that's the story that goes with that. They like added one on later, they added one section of the building on later. But all of the bed lengths are different, which makes it very difficult for production farming, which is what we want to do. We want the bed length to be as uniform as possible. This is certainly borrowed from ground level farming. Uniform creates consistency. It's really helpful for many aspects of everyday farming when you're calculating your irrigation zones, your flow rates, knowing how much water is being delivered to each zone. It helps standardize how much fertilizer you're using. For annual production, we do have to use fertilizer. Also, when you're calculating your harvest, it makes it really easy. You can look at a bed length and say, okay, these middle beds are 500 square feet. If those are perfectly planted with salad greens, I know on their first yield, no matter what, they'll yield around 90 to 100 pounds of arugula, say, on their first harvest. Uniformity also helps when it comes to materials, things like bed covers, if you're cutting burlap, or those tarps that we saw earlier. To cover the bed, the material can be used on other beds of the same size. There won't be waste or surplus. And then all of those materials are versatile and interchangeable. If you want to swap, say, your overhead irrigation with your drip irrigation one year, if the beds are similar in length, they can be used in other sections, and you don't have to recut things or change the system. All this adds up to hours of labor and productivity, which is really important for farming. These are some snapshots from the early stages of the Javits farm, planning the Javits farm. And the layout was a really important conversation. So these are two images that were eventually discarded for what I'm going to show on the next slide. But at one point, we were considering these meandering paths that took guests from one end of the farm to the other, trying to simulate a nature walk through the farm. Both of these are really interesting, but neither really lends itself well to production farming, because as you can see on the left, all of those beds would have been different sizes. This is what the farm eventually looks like, which is kind of boring, but the farmers really appreciate it. Okay, so now just a little bit about layout and drainage, where you're putting soil versus what's on the farms as far as existing infrastructure. So the layout of the farm, especially on existing buildings, is going to be especially important when it comes to drainage. This is probably not as serious of an issue 12 years ago or even 5 years ago, but now this is probably an important conversation as ever when we're designing green roofs because of climate change. We now experience much stronger storms carrying a lot more moisture. They're called cloud bursts, which basically means there's an extreme amount of precipitation in a short period of time. This is what we saw during Hurricane Ida. We got almost 8 inches of water in 1 hour in the city, which is historic. And so the farms and future of green roofs need to be able to handle this deluge. So we keep this in mind when we're considering existing drains and making sure that the design of the green roof doesn't inhibit drainage. This is especially important in areas where the green roof separates the drain from a potential leak point like a bulkhead. So as you'll see in the next slides, we've either had to remove parts of the green roof or we've added in drainage channels, which Chris's company helped us with, to encourage better movement to the drain. So an example of this is, on the left is the original design. As you can see, the green roof is doing what I would say too good of a job and preventing water from entering the drain, which is behind the soil retaining edge in the farm space. And over time, the water will slowly trickle through the edge. You can see the slits at the bottom of these edges. That's where the water flows through the soil and then to the drain. But with these heavy, intensive storms, this is not a good design anymore. So now we've changed a lot of our setup, a lot of the layout to look something more like this, where there's a direct access to the drain. It's not in the soil, it's not completely surrounded by soil so that you don't have this water backing up. And you can see in the very top right corner where the bulkhead is and where you could potentially have a leak point. So that's what we have on the left, the top left. Water backing up because it's trying to get through that edging. The slits in the edgings are usually only 1 to 2 inches tall, so it takes a long time. If you have a storm like Ida, where you're getting a ton of rain in a short period of time, it can be an issue. On the right, bottom right, are 2 other ways to prevent this. So we have slotted channels and drainage pipes. Both help mitigate that excess buildup on the outside of the edging. So if you're adding the slotted drain channels into the soil, that will help keep the soil dry all of the time, whether you're irrigating, whether there's a storm or not. It's just opening up space in the soil, which is very helpful. Or you can go with the version on the right, which is just a drainage pipe, which allows the water from the outside to move directly towards the drain, and you won't have that buildup on the outside. We like both of these versions, but we feel like this one on the right with the drainage pipes is more efficient for when it's not raining heavily, because we'll be irrigating our soil, and if you have slotted channels, then the water is moving more freely to the drain, and we want that water to be in the soil irrigating the crops. But both work and both have their place. Quick tangent on drainage. Chris had mentioned this in his slides. This is the Waven system where there is, or Metropolder, sorry, the system, we call it Metropolder. It was bought by a company named Waven. This is another approach to incorporating additional drainage or different types of drainage onto green roofs. It's a new system for us. We're really excited about it. It's out of the Netherlands, just a different type of green roof. We installed one in 2021. They're also called purple roofs because you have water storage, which is the blue, and then the vegetation, which is the green. Combine them together and you get purple. You see it has a lot of the traditional green roof components. You have the waterproof layer, root barrier, soil or substrate, vegetation, and filter fabric. But instead of the drainage mat, there is a buffer system. That's what they call it. And at the drain, there is a dam and a smart valve. And the dam keeps the water underneath the green roof and or opens and closes as needed. But the dam allows the system to hold onto water in between storms and after storms. The system better manages stormwater management because it's deliberately holding onto that water, keeping it from the drains. The dam is also hooked up to the smart valve, which has all different types of sensors. It measures the depth of water in the buffer system. It's connected to the internet, so it's also noting the forecast. If it senses, if the weather forecast is saying that a large storm is coming through, the dam will drop automatically. And then open up that space for additional water from rainfall. The plants are able to access the water as well, reducing your needs for irrigation. Within the system, there is fabric that wicks up towards the soil, and so they're able to access the water. It doesn't completely separate it. This is when we were installing it in 2021. The arrows weren't supposed to be here. They're supposed to show up as I pointed out things. So the first arrow on the bottom left points to the waterproofing root barrier layer. The middle arrow is a protection felt protecting the waterproofing layer. And then the third is pointing to the buffer system, which basically just looks like milk crates. They interlock into one another, and they're very strong. You can put intensive growing meat. You can do a very deep soil on this system. We had a range for this project. It started at 6 inches, and we bermed up to like 20, 24 inches. One of my former coworkers is in this picture. She helped install this project. And then on top of the buffer system is another layer of filter fabric that prevents soil from going into the buffer system. We're really excited about this type of green roof system. We definitely want to see it more incorporated into future green roof designs. Some other things to consider when building a rooftop farm, just when it comes to layout. So where is your tool storage? Where's your office? Where's your compost bins? Do you need a greenhouse? Do you need a walk-in? You definitely want an elevator. You don't want to be walking up the steps with all of the produce that's coming off the farm. And then another thing to keep in mind, especially on existing structures, is where are your strong winds originating? Can you use existing bulkheads to block wind? If it's a new building and the soil's deep enough, can you create any vegetated hedges to block wind? Wind is a farmer's worst enemy, especially on roofs. Greenhouses are also really important. So if your plan is to buy seedlings or bring them in from outside sources, a greenhouse really isn't needed. But on a production farm like ours in Javits, we have greenhouses as we need to start over 60,000 seedlings every year. Seedlings can go for like $2 from your local nursery, so that would be a pretty insane annual cost and logistical nightmare if you had to buy 60,000 plants every year. For smaller sites, it doesn't really make sense. We have clients that we're managing their farm spaces. We start their seedlings for them and bring them to site. And that's because, their rooftops are much smaller and a greenhouse either wouldn't fit or would just take up a lot of valuable real estate. Okay, so accessibility. Who's doing the farming? For the point of this presentation, when I say accessibility, is it staff that you're hiring, or is it people in the building where the farm is being built? For us, our farms require pretty intense physical labor. That's because we can't utilize traditional machinery like tractors or even walk behind tractors that you see in a lot of market gardens. Our soils also, our farms are meant to look like ground level farms, so the soil is at your feet. So the work can be pretty stressful on your body. So just keeping in mind like where, who's going to be eventually doing the work. As you can see, this tractor is laying down plastic on a bed, and we have 4 people doing it on the farm. But there are garden designs that do incorporate more accessibility to tenants and residents of the building. They're not traditionally green roofs, but I think it's important to mention them. So on the left is a rooftop farm in Manhattan. They're using metal troughs to grow vegetables, and on the right is a rooftop farm in Paris designed for people with disabilities and wheelchairs. Raised beds and containers are more ergonomic, less bending, squatting, reaching. And this is important because we're seeing a lot more designs for communal rooftop gardens and residential towers, primarily made from containers. But you could replace many of the pavers or decking and incorporate this into a green roof, so you're not losing the ecological or stormwater management benefit of a green roof. Another design consideration is whether or not you or the client wants a space for events or gatherings. At our Long Island City farm, there was existing rooftop beams left from old HVAC units. We made these into a long table, perfect for communal dinners, shown here. I don't have a picture of the existing beams, but you get the idea. We did something similar at this roof in Williamsburg. You can see on the left the existing dunnage that was in place. Instead of removing it, we incorporated it into the green roof. We created an elevated garden space and added geofoam to create this slope to connect to the space to the rest of the green roof via a lawn. I think I might skip this just because I think I'm running out of time. And actually, I'm almost done. Okay, sorry. So for the event space at our Brooklyn Navy Yard farm, the event space was very much intentionally kept or added into the design from the very beginning. It's in the middle. It's hard to tell in this picture, but it's in the middle of the building. For us, we pay rent on these rooftops. We're incorporating, so incorporating an events area has been a huge boom for our bottom line. Price of vegetables doesn't really go up every year, but the cost of labor does. So having events as a part of our business is really important for generating revenue. Events beats vegetable sales hand over foot every year. And then for developers and realtors who are thinking of maybe incorporating some kind of rooftop growing space, gathering spaces combined with food production creates a more user-friendly amenity feature for people who want to be able to grow vegetables, and also increases property value, rents, etc. This is a roof, same roof in Williamsburg. They do have a small edible garden. It's not shown in this picture, but there's also a lawn element. There's a meadow. We have gathering spaces within the meadow so that their staff can come out and enjoy the space, take calls, work, and make the space more accessible so it's not just production farming. Okay, so just some things to think about if a green roof farm is something that you're interested in. What kinds of conditions do you need to have to successfully grow vegetables on a roof? Of course, sun exposure is number one. All vegetables need to have full sun, minimum of 6 hours, but ideally more. Roof strength, we've talked about this a little bit in other presentations as well. For us, for our rooftops, all the roofs can handle about 100 pounds per square foot. This is probably what you need at minimum to grow vegetables well, because it means you can have about 12 inches of soil. Height of the building, how tall is it? The taller the building, the windier the rooftop, and we do not want windy, we don't want to see rooftop farms on 40, story skyscraper. We were one time asked to consider installing one by the Hudson Yards. Our farms are 7, 12, and 10 stories in the air, and that's plenty. I do not recommend growing vegetables on anything much higher than that, especially because you're turning over the beds. So at some point in the year, you're going to have bare soil, and if it's really windy, soil can blow around, so you want to avoid that. Rooftop farms are also more like a beach or alpine environment, so you've got winds, direct sun exposure, more dramatic fluctuations in weather, so we don't want to add to these by putting a roof on a skyscraper. And then environmental conditions, so are we near a highway? You probably don't want to put a rooftop farm close to an elevated train track because of pollution. In our early years, we did an air quality test with 2 Cornell professors. We wanted to test accumulation and deposition of harmful particles at the ground level and at the roof to compare. Surprisingly, both were quite low. The results were quite low, but the ground level was definitely higher than the rooftop. Okay, so we have our right conditions, but who's the right client for this kind of project? Who's cultivating the space? Who's eating the vegetables? Where are they going? Who's using the space? And then, of course, the biggest who of all is who's paying for this. So we get approached more and more every year to consult on rooftop farming projects. Some seem very realistic, others not so much. It's important to keep in mind that farming is hard work. It's a skilled labor. If a client wants to have a farm on their roof, they need to keep in mind that it's not the same as an ornamental garden. Ornamental gardening is also a skilled labor. But either way, all of these options are not the same as a sedum roof, which maybe requires a couple of visits a year for weeding and drain inspection. But depending on the size, it could be one person's whole job to grow veggies or multiple people. So it's just, these are important conversations to have. And then of course, where are the vegetables going? What's the outlet? Is it a restaurant? That's easy, they go to the kitchen. Is it a residential building? Are the tenants paying for those vegetables? Is it a perk of living in the building? One thing to keep in mind is that like I said, price of vegetables stay pretty much the same. Cost of living goes up. So figuring out the economics of the farm early on is critical. And these are important conversations before you invest money into a green roof. These are just some examples of where we've seen Edo production do well on rooftops because of the model, because of the business model. So Vice is a project that I referenced in these slides earlier. They wanted their 16,000 square foot roof to be an all farm, but they didn't really have a plan for where all of the crops were going. So after discussing with them further, we shrunk down that 16,000 square feet to 1,000. And it's plenty of space for what they needed, which was they wanted the crops from the garden to go towards their YouTube channel Munchies. And we were able to grow plenty of food from that small space. And then the rest of the roof, like I had mentioned, is now more accessible to their employees. They come out, they utilize the space. There's a lawn where they can lounge. There's deck and pavers. Should I wrap? Yeah, okay. These are just two other rooftops. One in the West Village at Rosemary's. We grow vegetables for them. All of the food goes right to the kitchen. And then this one in Staten Island, which was built in 2020. The Nicotra Group is a real estate group. They have restaurants, they have a banquet hall, they have a cafe, and so all the vegetables go towards those outlets, and then they also leverage the farm for marketing purposes and for the story of having a rooftop farm. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
We have time for a couple questions. Hold on, we're going to use the mic, please, just so we get them on tape.
Can you just please repeat again how deep the soil for farming you think is the best?
The best depth? I would say minimum 12 inches on average, but if you can do more, that's always great, but that's where your budget and the existing infrastructure of the building come in. So if the building's strong enough, then more soil depth is better, but at minimum, you'll want 12 inches so that the plants are healthy.
So I just want to know, when do you accept visitors? What are the visiting hours? I'm close to Sunset Park, and I've been meaning to visit you for years now.
Great.
So if you could talk.
Yes, so our farms are not open to the public, but we do, similar to the Kingsland farms, we have open days. This summer, we used to be open to the public. Yeah, we used to be open to the public on Sundays, but we're switching that to one Sunday a month going forward. And the idea is that there'll be more activities, not just our farm stand, but that'll be announced on our website and probably on Instagram.
Does one of these three farms have a purple roof on it, and which one is that?
The purple roof was a project, no, sorry to answer your question, no. The purple roof was a residential project that we built in 2021 in Gowanus.
Any other questions?
I'm blanking. Okay, I'm blanking. I'll ask you after.
Okay.
One back here.
Do you need to replace the soil over the years in the farms, or does it sort of keep itself up?
We do add compost, and then we also fertilize with organic fertilizers.
Is 12 stories the maximum? What's the maximum for shooting the soil? Do you ever do it when you can't shoot soil?
Sorry, what was the question?
Is 12 stories the maximum for shooting soil up there? Or is
For
that just?
blowing soil for installation? No, I think you can, Chris might be a better person to ask this question too, but they can go above 12 stories. I don't know what the max is.
20s would probably be your max. It affects rate of production. So you'll just get less material out of that truck first going lower, potentially. Any other? Oh.
So you're farming against harsher environment, and you said it's a very labor intensive. How do you keep it cost effective and profitable?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question that we are dealing with every year, but events help, the design build department helps, but the farms generally are self-sustaining, and just keeping our practices super efficient, specializing in specific crops that we know will yield a higher amount, as opposed to, like the whole farm just being corn. You'll get, dollars per acre for corn harvests. But, by growing things like tomatoes and arugula and salad greens, those are things that we'll be able to price at a point that's helpful to keep the farm sustainable.
For nutrient runoff, what have you guys done since you first started versus what you do now with the higher nutrient levels that come off from runoff?
How do we handle that?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We definitely have to fertilize once or twice a year, especially when we're turning over beds. But it's kind of an inevitability with a lot of the salt nutrients that plants need, because once it rains, a lot of that will transport through water runoff. So yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer for that.
All right, I guess we can take a brief break, and then at 4 o'clock, we'll assemble our panel and take a few more questions. So please come right back for 4, and we'll get started back up. Thank you.
Thank you.